Why it's not a best idea to trust our eyes for calibration? Well, if you take a look, I have wrote down here or displayed the different workflow elements we need for color managed workflow, and we talked about the monitor, right? I think we explained that. We will talk about the ambient lighting and the hardware calibrator, and I think that's the interesting point, right? The hardware calibrator. I didn't write just calibrator, I write hardware calibrator, because it has to be an instrument, a hardware that measures it, not just a software, because we need to create a calibrated monitor profile. Now here's the thing, you can create that profile using different software programs, but why it's not a good idea is something I want to show in this video, and you will see more about this later in other videos as well. So we need a hardware calibrator, but let's say you want to do it with your eyes. Here is one of the things that might happen. Okay, let me just show you a few examples, few illusions if you will. Here we have two objects on screen which should be the same intensity in terms of luminance, so they should be just the same type of gray, and instead here's what happens, right? When I put this on them, they're completely the same, but when I remove that, one looks brighter than the other. Why? Because of the environment. What it is, the background behind it, is it darker or lighter? This really affects our eyes, so it's very difficult to make everything perfect. It's much better to let calibration device measure what's the luminance and then give us the correct answer, as opposed to trusting our eyes, which are easily fooled. And here's another example where different shades of gray appear to be all different, where in fact they're the same. Let me show you. Alright, just like what we did before. This was before, this is after, right? So the ambient really affects how bright we think something is. And the same applies for the color. Here we have different hues of color on left as opposed to the right, and in fact they're the same color as you might have guessed, but they don't appear at first. This is a very simple example, so it's not such a big deal. But here's a more extreme example. If you see on these two objects, there is a small black square, and as you can imagine, those colors are the same, even though they don't appear the same. Boom, they're not even the same as one another, but they're shifted to thinking that one is, if I go back, you see on the left the green appears more green, right? And we would say just that's green. On the right we have something that appears more yellow, we would say that's yellow. But in fact they're not a green or yellow, but somewhere in between, and they're exactly the same. Again, it's easy to fool our eyes. And here's by far my favorite example of this. Here you can see two cubes, and you can see different squares on them. Well, believe it or not, what we have here is some of those squares that you see are actually neutral gray color. Believe it or not, let me show you. I'm just gonna mask the ambient and just show you certain squares, and you'll see what I mean. Right? Quite remarkable when you think about it. Let's go back. So on the left, on the what we might think of as the yellow cube, and what we might think would be the blue squares, right? Check them out when I activate the mask. So this was before, this is after. Okay, now check the one on the right, what we think of as blue cube with blue squares, and let me add a mask to that. Right, so the yellow ones, which appear to be yellow, are actually gray. Pretty remarkable, isn't it? So you can see how easy it is to fool our eyes. It is difficult to get a consistent color if you're doing it with a software device. That's why we need a hardware calibrator.